video, we're going to go over all the sewing alphabet options in the Pfaff Creative Icon 2. So we are doing these letters with the feed dogs up with the normal sewing machine presser foot, but do remember the stitches on the sewing machine side can all be transferred over to the embroidery side of the machine, and you can actually embroider these out in a hoop. But for today, we're going to focus on ways you combine your letters together in the memory, create multiple rows if you want, and then how to do spaces and uppercase and lowercase and all your alphabet styles. Okay, so this particular page was from our stitch book, and if you haven't done a stitch book yet, it is time to Google how to make the ultimate stitch book and find our video of how we do this, because stitching out your letters or your stitches are really going to get you excited about this. Even as I turned to this page, I was reminded of how fun this was to stitch. And yes, it is kind of just all random because these are the monogram stitches and they stitch out one at a time. So I'm going to show you the little trick on those. But before we get here, we are going to go into Sequence Creator. And you'll notice when you're in here, this is when all your stitches go away. You don't have anything in this area. If you are still seeing stitches when you go into this, touch the A off to the side to find where you will load the font. So these are all the built-in alphabet styles in this machine. And I want you to take a particular look at the size that is noted beside them. And these are millimeters. So do you remember how wide this machine is? It stitches 9 millimeters wide. That's how wide your presser foot is for your traditional decorative stitches. Okay, but look, these alphabets that are first on the list, they are 12 millimeters wide. So they're going to actually be a little bit taller. You'll also notice as they stitch out, your fabric's going to be moved a little to the left and right as it stitches, which is pretty cool. That also makes you realize that this grand alphabet that is noted as 17 millimeters is going to be much bigger. So a lot of people always ask me, oh, I want letters that are bigger. And this machine actually has that. So it has sideways motion abilities in with the alphabets. You are able to make these any size smaller than what they come up with. So if you are looking to maybe not have them as big, but you want that font look, you can also go in and adjust. So as you pick a letter font style, you will see a keyboard will come up at the bottom. Just like we've had for typing in various things, you have uppercase, you have lowercase, and of course your punctuation and space options are here. As you go to like your traditional block font, you will find you'll also have some of your traditional European and international symbols and a few other things like your question marks and exclamation points. So just note that depending on which of these functions you have touched, you will get different things showing. So if you have just note you have uppercase, you have lowercase, and everybody in between. You also have an outline, which is kind of fun if I touch it. And here's a little bit. As I touch just a couple letters, you're going to see them come up right about here. And you'll notice that this little box is sometimes in your way. Remember, if you see those kind of 4 hash marks that are vertical next to any box, means you can move it around. So with this in my way, I'm going to touch and drag it somewhere else. So as I add a letter, you're going to be able to see it a lot easier here on screen. So as I do ABC or AVBC, you have the backspace just like you would on any device to delete out your letters. And did you see we could actually combine different fonts with each other? So as you place them, you can actually do even just a row of ABC in each font and then get an idea of what it looks like and how big it stitches out. If you minimize the keyboard, you can go and edit a stitch, just like you're able to edit a decorative stitch. You can come in here and adjust a width or length depending on what your options are. I'm making that longer. I can't make it any taller, but I could actually make it longer, which would give it a more fatter look. So that is exactly the size it's going to stitch. Now again, if you're looking for spaces, you do have that space bar, so you could go ahead and write out, so for like a quilt label, if you were going to say this quilt was made and then by, and then on the next line you will have your name or a date, you will do each line individual. And you will also find, once you touch OK here, it will tell you how long this stitch stitches out. If you go back into Edit Stitch, I see that the length of one repeat is 121 millimeters. So that does give me an idea of what I'm working with. Now if I do want to go back and edit my memory, if you touch and hold on the screen, you see Edit in Sequence Creator. We also have some mirror images and also a Save as Default, of course. But really, let's do Edit in Stitch Creator, and that will bring us back in where we could bring up that keyboard as needed and delete out something we did not want earlier. So again, you can always, whatever's highlighted is actually what it's going to be edited. So if I needed one stitch removed, I can just go ahead and remove that. Once I start stitching, I could also save this, and then we have the option to save it in the memory of the machine, also known as the My Sewnet. So if I was to go ahead and I'm going to just put in test 1, that means I know I could probably go back later and delete any of the ones that say test. Save it. I could also save it in one of my folders. So if I was working on a specific thing, I'm going to show you later where we retrieve that. But then we can go ahead, touch OK, and it will stitch out that. And again, if you don't want it to stitch out over and over and over, we can work with the keys at your fingertips, like the scissor button, which will make it just stitch out once you touch it while you're stitching, and then it will just end it at the end of one repeat. So usually when you need a name, you don't need like Sarah, 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 all the way across that. Okay, so let's say we go back to a straight stitch, we're sewing, or it's the next day, and I want to retrieve what I've saved. You're going to look for the folder. Speaking of folders, folders always show up first, and then your individual files, you can see mine, I have lots, will be in alphabetical order. I see down here I have my test 1, and if I choose it and touch and hold, I can bring it back up. And then also I can go back in there and delete it as I wish. So it is really easy to save it, come back tomorrow, do a stitch out when you're ready to actually stitch it. Remember, stabilizer is your friend. Let me talk about the monograms. So we don't really do those in Sequence Creator. We do those separately because if you've touched your stitch menu, I'm going to just open this a little bit further. Across the top is what I'm looking for. And if you go all the way to menu 7, one says monogram. So here are your letters. And then we also have monogram 2. Those are more letters. You know what? I didn't even stitch those out. These are all are these the regular ones? Yes, this is what's stitched out is monogram 1. And yes, every time I open this machine, I find more stitches that I could be stitching out. So let's just pull one of these up. When you pull it up, it's a stitch. And because we can't see it, we could minimize this. And remember, if this is in your way, which it will be for this particular stitch, move this little box out. Okay, what we're looking for. How did I know where these were going to stitch? What I looked for is the plus. The plus is where the stitch is actually going to start stitching. So I'm going to need to kind of get an idea that if I wanted to add this A to this R, I need to have my start stitch be somewhere out here so that as it made the A, the overlap is appropriate. Now, how would you know where to start or how far away? I would stitch one of these out ahead of time, and I could measure so I could easily link, if I wish, these together. Now remember, these monograms could come over on the embroidery side, and you can do it all on screen over there too. So you do have that option. But you know what? Sometimes I just want a quick stitch out. So the letter that I can just touch and I can place on my fabric, and before I know it, I have a monogram on something, and I didn't have to get my hoop out, my embroidery module out, figure out what I'm doing. I could just stitch it. So again, stabilizer is your friend. Look for that little plus. So as you can see, each letter is going to have a location for a slightly different start point. So here's on the E, it's going to be up in that area. On the F, it's kind of up in this area. Then that way you have an idea that you're not going to start too close to the fabric or overrun something you've already stitched. Do a test run until you're more familiar with how these start and how they stop, and also how big they actually look on your fabric. I know that's the actual size, but sometimes we get confused and it's like, oh, that's a lot bigger or smaller than I thought it would be. So I hope you'll play around with the letters, play around with saving them in your machine, and also adjusting their size when you play with Sequence Creator, and stitch out a sample of all your letters that are built into the fabulous Pfaff Creative Icon 2.